Welcome everyone to the first ever Teachers Talk Hour. My name is Colby Guerin, and I'm a high school earth science teacher who's testing my skills in a talk show scenario. Today we have some distinguished guests, which include a high school and a middle school physical education teacher, Mr. Josh Rabidou. We also have Mr. Dylan Bob, who is a music teacher, a distinguished science teacher, Mrs. Kareem Marie, and we have many other magical and wonderful guests coming here. We do have a musical guest if they show up. We don't know if they will or not because we are so underfunded, but our musical guest is the internet sensation Piano Cat. Don't know how we're getting them here because we don't have that much money, but we're trying. And finally, we here at Teachers Talk Hour would like to thank you all for taking your time out of your day to watch this fantastic show, and we hope that you enjoy every minute of it. So without further ado, let's get into what we're going to be doing today. Before we get started, I want to take this time to say a few things about what this show is going to be taking a look at. This week's episode, we here at Teachers Talk want to know what our guests think about educational psychology and what they need to understand in order to become an important or a reliable teacher in their school district. We'll ask all of our guests the same questions to see what their feedback is on all those answers and see if they have the same answers in general. I too will be answering these questions so that you, the viewers, have an idea of what my ideas are as well as what the other individuals' ideas are. No, not all these individuals will be answering the same way, but we have to be respectful for what they have to say. So without further ado, let's get into the first question. The first question is, why do educators need to understand psychology? In my thinking, psychology is important to understand about anything really. The definitions for psychology is the study of behavioral and mental processes, ignore that, but processes in individuals. Being able to identify what the individuals are thinking and what they may be, how they're reacting to what you're saying is crucial to understanding how to become an important teacher. Once you are able to understand what they're thinking or what they're doing, you'll be able to think of a lesson plan that you can use to help them to succeed in learning all the materials that you want to teach. This could be, what else am I thinking? That can in return actually help others that are in your class learn material at a different rate that could be beneficial to both the individual that is struggling and the ones that are in the class overall. So it can be a win-win situation for all the individuals in your class, where that you're understanding what students are thinking and that all the students are understanding what you're going to be teaching. The next question that we have is brought to us by one of my former colleagues is, which of these theories, approaches, or ideas from one of our wonderful books that we've read in one of our previous classes back in college was, can you see which of these theories, approaches, and ideas can we use and apply to our classroom and why? When it comes to theories, I think that the most important theory for any kind of science teacher is the theories based off of William James. His theory, in my own words, means that educators introduce topics that are just beyond the student's capability of understanding. So if you're talking about, if you're a math teacher, you're going to talk about division even though they may only be at multiplication, just so that they can be introduced to a topic that's just outside of their range of what they can do. This gets the students to start thinking about what the topic can be about, and that in return will make the students more eager to learn what is actually going on. An example of this in my own field would be talking about like the tectonic movements, because I'm an earth science teacher. I would first ask the class what kind of or how far the tectonic plates move in a year, all the students will start to think and give maybe an outrageous answer, but at least they're thinking about what could be done. Then I would go and introduce the topic as a whole and just state that, and then in that lesson plan, I would give that answer to them so that they are still focused on what that question was while at the same time still learning what the topic is on. It'll just satisfy both their idea to remember something something specific as how far the plates move to the overall topic at hand. And finally, the last question that we'll be asking our guest today is, why is brain research important in teaching? So brain research is crucial for any individuals in the educational field. They have to understand how the brain develops. At every stage of the student's life, their brain is always changing. It's crucial that educators are up to date on where the brain should be for the age range that they're working with. They also have to be able to understand where the brain could have been at the age before and after, depending on if their individuals are lagging behind their peers mentally or physically sometimes. So being able to see a little leeway in their age is crucial for any educator to be able to teach the right way. An example of this can be that teenagers in their between the ages of like 15 and 16 are more worried about communicating with their peers than actually learning, whereas you have one individual who's more worried about their future when they're in their 30s. Those individuals, I know this is an extreme example, but they are more developed in brain material or matter, which makes no sense, but they're more developed in that they're not worried about their social skills, but they're more worried about their future endeavors. And it just shows that you can have a range from being at that one particular spot where they're worried about their friends to they're worried about their future. It's all based on how their brain is developed. So at this time, we would like to take a short break and have a word from our sponsors. Okay, so my director is telling me that we don't have any sponsors. We don't know why. So we'll get right into the next, we'll get into our first interview. So please welcome to the talk desk, Mr. Josh Rabideau.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Mr. Josh Rabideau. It's an honor to have you on this show, Josh.
Good to be here.
May I call you Josh?
That's fine.
All right. Now, Josh, I have a few questions I would like to ask you about educational psychology.
By all means.
All right. So the first question I have for you is, why do educators need to understand psychology and or learning theories?
Psychology is important to understand because you better understand how your students are thinking, and they will learn in the class how they're going to learn in the classroom. Being able to understand psychology leads to new theories in what you're going to teach. How your students learn is based on what learning theories you use. I feel learning theories are more important than psychology. Some teachers don't have the opportunity to use theories because they're more like Regents-based, so they have to teach to a test. So they have a standardized lesson that they have to learn. So I feel that explaining how something works is important, and not only for the sake of knowledge itself. Explanations can lead to solutions. You can't fix something if you don't understand what's gone wrong. You can't prevent cancer cells from madly multiplying if you don't know how and why they started in the first place. To interfere with the process, you have to understand the process, and it's all overwhelming, complex stuff.
That is far beyond what I could think, but it makes clear sense that you're looking not only that subjects are taught to a regent, but that they need to be taught to an extent.
Exactly.
That's great. Now the next question I have is a more challenging question to answer, I think, but it's, what kind of theories, approaches, or ideas that you can remember can you see that you can apply to your classroom setting? Now I know you're a physical education teacher, right?
That's correct.
So what kind of theories can you apply to your classroom setting?
Obviously being focused in physical education, I'm a huge fan of John Dewey with his learning theories. I feel that he believed that you have to learn it doing something, and I feel in learning in physical education you have to be able to do it to know. I mean, you could talk about shooting a basketball all day, but by doing it, you're going to learn more. You're going to learn the movement. You're going to learn how to work each muscle group, and how you have to, where you keep your hand, where you have to look when you shoot it. So by doing something, you're being an active learner. And you're actively participating in the process. And also, he believed in like basic having that males and females should have the opportunity to learn. He believed in different ethnic groups, and being a former U.S. bobsled athlete, I worked with people from Jamaica, I've worked with Russian athletes, I've worked with South Korean athletes, I've worked with people from Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Latvia, and I learned so much from each of them. Like a lot of the Jamaican athletes are more sprinters at one time, and I learned a lot from them of how to push the sled and how to run based off. You may think it's easy to learn how to run, but there's a scientific way how to run and how you can be faster by putting your arms in a certain way, having your legs up a certain length. I'm a big fan in learning how that you have to do something, you have to perform it yourself on how to learn.
Wow. I'm so glad to hear that you were able to learn so much from just a different set of people that you may never have contact with if you never joined that U.S. bobsled team.
Correct.
And it's incredible that you're able to merge those things that you learned into a curriculum that it would be educational for everyone.
Exactly.
That's phenomenal work just to hear. Now I have one last question, and it's based off of brain research. Why do you think that is important in teaching?
Brain research is big in teaching. The early years of human development established the basic architecture and function of the brain. This early period of development affects the next stage, which will affect the later stages. Poor early development affects health physically and mentally, behavior, and learning in later life. It follows in that order, which makes it easier for you to track. So it's all one process for brain development.
That's not as in-depth as I went, but you still hit the point where you have to understand how the brain is growing.
Yes.
And seeing that you went from a stage-to-stage process, that is incredible to hear. Well, thank you again, Josh, for coming on the show.
No problem.
I'm glad that you came. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Josh Rafferty, one more time.
Thank you. Thank you.
After this commercial, oh wait, we don't have commercials because we don't have sponsors. We'll be hearing from Mr. Dylan Bob. Mr. Dylan Bob? What? Mr. Dylan Bob's not here. Can you send in the next one? None? None of the teachers are here. Well, that's great. Well, it appears that no one else has showed up for our show. So, we'd like to thank Mr. Josh Rafferty one more time for his taking the time out of his day to come to this show where it seemed like no one else cared to come. So, as for us here, I guess we'll be signing off. So, once again, thank you, Mr. Josh Rafferty. Thank you to the producers, director here. Until next time, if there is one, I'm Colby Guerin. Have a good night, and thanks for watching. This is the Teacher's Hour.